Right, welcome to Sound Team Training. I'm really glad you've all decided to either begin or continue serving with the Sound Team. Being a Sound Team Tech is one of the most important serving positions at the Oasis on Sunday mornings. It's up to you to make sure that all live audio on Sunday morning is set up and optimized in order to provide members and guests with the best experience possible. To help you accomplish this, here are some operating procedures and just a few helpful tips. When serving in first service, please arrive at church no later than 6:45 a.m. This is when all of our setup teams will arrive, and as well as the worship team. When serving in second service, please be at the soundboard no later than 10:15. This is to help with any last minute sound checks that might need to happen before second service and to make sure everything is where it needs to be. In the morning when the shed is open, you will work alongside the setup and worship teams to pull every box and all the equipment out of the shed and into the MPR. You should only be focusing on pulling sound equipment as the other teams involved in setup will take care of everything else. Once the equipment has been brought to the MPR, you should start setting it up at the back of the room with the table that is also in the shed. When setting up, be sure to keep any loose wires and cables as tidy as possible, as this not only looks more professional, but it also reduces the risks of tripping hazards. Alright, so with plugging in, I'm only going to be going over some of the really basic setup stuff, just so that the next part of the training is a little more clear. In order to learn the more nuanced ins and outs of setting up and running the soundboard, you'll have to shadow one of our current sound team volunteers, and that should be really helpful. This should cover most of it, but there are a few things that you can only really learn on a Sunday morning. So once everything is set up in its physical location, we can start plugging stuff in. So we're going to start with channels 1 through 4, and these are the black ones. So channel 1 is going to be one of the wireless mics, so we're going to plug in channels 2. Oops, that's 2, and then 3, and then 4, just like that. Then our wireless one is going to be this guy that says Ben. Alright, and then just kind of, like I said, keep those tidy as much as possible. And then we've got channels 5 through 9 in the white. We can plug those in. This is channel 7, channel 5, channel 6, channel 8. Alright. And then channels 9 through 12 are next. So we've got 9, and then 10, and then for 11 through 14 we have another set of wireless mics. So we have Dustin's mic, which will go right here, channel 12, and then we have David's mic, which will go in channel 11, and you can see these are all labeled right there. And then the audience mic is an instrument cable, so it's not an XLR like these other ones, and that's going to go into the line in, which is the top input there. And then the only other one of these from the Snake are going to be channel 15, which is usually Melissa's violin if she's playing. So that'll plug in there. Next, we have these two monitor inputs. They're labeled blue and yellow. These are going to go in here and right here, since we've determined that these are the ones that work. Unfortunately, we have some connection issues with other ones. And usually, we'll just be running one monitor, and it'll pretty much always be this front monitor, so the yellow one, and that'll plug in this bottom corner here. Next, we have these two main output channels, so they're labeled left and right. These are coming from the back of the EQ right there, and these are going to plug into left and right here. So these two, just like that. All right, so the next thing that we're going to plug in is going to be, and unfortunately I don't have it here with me today, but the recording device we have is going to plug into these two right here. So these are outputs, these are main outputs, and they just kind of piggyback off of what's being sent through these guys. So yeah, we've got a left and a right for that, and those will be plugged in right there. Headphones are going to be plugged in usually with this little device right here in the headphone jack, and you can plug some headphones in and listen to the mix if you need to. For now though, I'm going to be using it over here on channel 1 so we can go through the next part of the training. So the next part of training is going to be staging gain. So a gain stage is any point in the audio system where the signal passes through an amplifier. In our system, we have microphone preamps, guitar pickups, violin microphone, preamp on the mixer, so this guy right here, and then finally our power amplifiers just before the signal passes through the PA speakers. Pretty much the only stage we can adjust is going to be these preamps, so these white knobs up here that say gain right next to them, and then the gain knobs on the power amplifiers. The wireless mics, I believe, have adjustable gain in their settings, but those are set where they need to be, so we're not going to mess with those. Alright, so moving on. Each gain stage has the potential to introduce noise into our signal path. So the goal of staging gain is to reduce that noise as much as possible. Fortunately, the fact that we only have a couple gain stages makes it a lot simpler for us to do that and to get it right on Sunday mornings. So when we're setting gain, we want to make sure we're setting it in a way that prevents clipping. And so what clipping is, it's when there are unexpected peaks in our signal, and we want to avoid that as much as possible, because that's going to overload our gain stage that we're, like, whatever stage of gain that it's going through right there. So clipping is bad because it leads to distortion in the signal. And so I'll show you here what clipping looks like. So if you see, I've got some music playing through this channel, and this little green light here means that we've got some signal coming through. So I'm going to hit this PFL solo button. This will start blinking, and you'll see we've got some signal coming through here on this meter. So what we're going to do, we're going to watch this, because this is going to tell us everything we need to know about where our gain is set. So adjusting this little white knob right here, you can see as I crank it up, it's going to get all the way up to the top of this little meter. When it turns red right there, it means it's clipping. And you can see that over here as well. with this little red peak light. It's going to light up when you're clipping. And what that means is that we've hit a point where the signal is overloading this gain stage, so we've got to back that off and bring it down. All right. Okay, so when we are setting gain, what we want to do, we start off, we're going to set this slider right here, and I'll just unmute that for the sake of having the lights look normal. So we're going to set this slider right here to 0, so you can see there's a little range right here, 2 little boxes, and then in the middle it says 0. So we're going to set our slider right there at 0, and then we're going to come up here, and this will be, you know, at 0, and this should be done for every mic, every instrument during sound check on Sunday morning. So we're going to take this, and we're going to go from what is that, about 7 o'clock, which is 0 on this meter, or negative infinity, I guess is actually what it is. But we're going to turn that clockwise, and always watching this. So you got to have this solo button on to see it over here. We're going to watch this until we're peaking somewhere around 0, just doing a normal like test 1, 2, 3 with a normal, like, fairly confident speaking voice. Having it peak around 2, 0, it will be good, since when, you know, a vocalist is singing, those louder notes are going to peak somewhere around 10, 11, which is still, you can see in the orange when I crank it up here, and that means it's not clipping. So, and those are just peaks, so those will be fine. The majority of what they're singing will be, you know, right around here, still in the green. So for this, and this is just, you know, a song being played from an iPad into this line in. The proper gain setting right there is around 12 o'clock. So once you have set the gain, and this is set properly now, so I don't need that anymore. So this has proper gain setting, and we're not going to change that. Gain is not a volume knob. It's pretty much just for getting the right amount of signal through the board into the speakers. So we're not going to touch this white knob anymore for the remainder of like a Sunday service if that was a mic. All right. So the next thing that will be done, so like when you're setting gain, we're going through sound checks. Once we're done setting gain, we're going to start setting the levels for individual mics and instruments. So what that's going to look like, we're always going to we're going to have the mains totally out. There shouldn't be any volume coming through the mains. We're going to set the monitors first, so that anybody on stage can hear themselves and hear the instruments that are going on the way they want to. So we're focused on setting the monitors first, and what that is just, you know, this is a volume knob. So this is basically just a slider for the monitor speakers that are on stage. So let's say we have like this, or here, 2 vocalists, so 1 and 2, those are going to be vocalists, and then maybe a guitar and a piano. So we've set the gain for those, and those are looking good. What we're going to do is just work with the worship team to get kind of what they are feeling sounds best up there. And we're going to, first with the sliders, kind of get where we want the volumes of each individual instrument. All right, so maybe guitar's a little lower, piano's, you know, right there with it. Vocals are right around 0, because vocals should always be the prominent feature in any mix. So now we've kind of like set the mix a little bit. We're gonna mess with the monitors, so like, you know, somebody will say, hey, I need the guitar up a little more. So we're gonna go to channel 5 here, and we're gonna kind of give them a little more guitar in the monitor. So that's pretty much how that works. Once that's done, we can bring in the mains and we can see how that sounds in the mains, and make small adjustments here and there to kind of like smooth it out a little bit. And if at any time you need to bring up, like say we have all 4 vocalists, we've got a guitar, piano, we've got bass and drums in. So all the instruments right here from 5 onward to 10, you can come over here and it says instrument mix, right? So you can bring those all down. And these are just left and right, so you want to bring those down at the same time. But if instruments need to come down, you just take those down and it'll bring every instrument down a little bit. Same with vocals. You've got vocals here. So if vocals need to go up or down, you can just take those both, and those will go up or down with each other. Otherwise, try and keep these about as close to 0 as you can. All right, so one of the most important things that you can do as a sound tech is to just keep an ear out for what's happening during the service. So I'll give you an example. If somebody's vocals are a little too low and they're like maybe leading a song and getting overwhelmed by the piano or something, what you can do, you just take this slider and just kind of bring the piano out a little bit, or bring their voice up a little bit, just to help their voice stand out a little more. Or if say the guitar's a little too loud, just be listening for that and just kind of like bring it out a little bit. That's probably one of the most important things you can do to make a service really dynamic, is to just be always listening for those little things that could make a mix sound better. So anything like something being a little too prominent in the mix, just bring it down a little bit. Or maybe there's not enough bass in the guitar, you can bump that up. So that's what these all are. These are frequency knobs. So you've got high, mids, and then lows. So these are just going to bump or take out some of that frequency. So you can make the mid range frequency stand out a little more by turning these clockwise, or take them out a little bit if they're a little overwhelming with turning them anti-clockwise. But it's just little things like that that just pay attention to, and be just always listening for something that could make the mix sound a little better. Another thing, just a general note, pastor's mics, so 11 and 12, these are going to be unmuted for the whole service, both services. The pastors can operate a mute button on their transmitters, and so that should be left to them. These should never be muted. So for tearing down, you're going to want to pretty much, this is just for whoever's serving in second service, you're going to want to allow for 10 minutes or so before or after the end of the service, before you start tearing stuff down. That's just so music can play while people are talking and filing out. So yeah, just leave 10 minutes or so before you start doing that. When you have begun tearing down, it's really important to just keep focused on that. Don't start talking to friends in the middle of that and getting sidetracked. We do have to be out of the building by 12:30, so got to get everything put up by then. So when you're pulling everything apart, so when you're pulling these out of here, you don't want to grab the wire and pull the wire. You want to grab the connector and make sure you've got a firm grip on it, and pull it out holding the connector. And then just set those aside gently. Just make sure you're handling everything with the utmost care. This stuff is getting a little old, and we just want to make sure it lasts. Another thing with these, a lot of times they'll kind of come unscrewed like that. So if they're a little loose, just make sure to tighten those down before putting it away or plugging them in. So yeah, that's just a general note with tearing down. When everything has been boxed up, so this is in a box. I don't know if you can see that really well, but it's in its box right now. It won't be in its box on the table on a Sunday, but put it everything in its own box and wrapped up, so like cables are wrapped up really neatly, and then all those boxes are just going to go out to the shed where they can fit into their little spots in the shed. So some general notes just as we wrap up here. In the morning, or before service has started, once the 5-minute countdown has begun, you should be sitting at the soundboard and double checking everything, just making sure every channel that needs to be unmuted is unmuted. So definitely pastors' mics, but right after the 5-minute countdown, a song's going to start. So whatever vocals are in need to be unmuted, whatever instruments are in need to be unmuted, drums, if they're there, those need to be unmuted. Yeah, just make sure whatever needs to be unmuted is unmuted. Just a note with that. I know that we've all got friends, that come to the services, and we want to talk with those friends. But once that 5-minute countdown has started, it's work time. So you should be at the soundboard, making sure everything's ready to go. Let's see. So the computer channel as well, which is channel 14 over here, which also I don't have plugged in because I don't have it with me, but that'll be unmuted for the whole service as well, since we do play pads through the computer, and we do have the video running. A note with the pads and the videos, a lot of times those have different kind of volume levels from the computer. So the volume that a pad is at during a song is probably going to be a little lower than what the video volume is. So a lot of times that'll have to be bumped up when the video starts playing. So that's another thing to be really on top of during the service, is just making sure you've got enough volume in channel 14 for when that video comes on. That's something you should go over with the person running the slides, because they'll be switching over to the video, or David or Dustin will be switching to the video. But you should go over with them before or after sound check to make sure you know what the right volume level is for that video. With the recording device, that's the thing that I mentioned is plugged in up here. You're going to want to check that and make sure it is actually recording all the audio. And our current sound team volunteers can kind of run you through how to do that during a shadowing time. But just make sure that it's recording both services. This gives David and Dustin just kind of some options on which one they want to use. Sometimes they're not the same. One will be better, or slightly better than the other, and they'd like to pick the better one of the two. So make sure to record both services. We also have an audio device for our hearing impaired members that is just plugged into someone's phone, and that phone will transmit some audio to a thing that will caption it. But what's going to happen is we have a plug-in right here that will just go into one of these phone channels, left or right, I mean, and that'll plug into the phone. There's a separate adapter that will plug into this guy for that. And then lastly, I just can't stress it enough, double check to make sure that channels are unmuted that need to be unmuted. There's nothing more awkward than being up on stage and you start speaking and there's nothing coming through the main speakers. And so that's up to you guys. Make sure that channels are unmuted that need to be unmuted before the service starts. All right. So thank you guys. This is just some basic overview, kind of walk through some stuff, some general stuff. Definitely you should shadow a current sound volunteer. Make sure you kind of learn the more tricky technical in and outs of running this. So thank you guys. Glad you decided to listen to the sound team training this year.